Let's create a weaving of a house. We're going to start with a piece of cardboard that's 6 inches by 7 inches. It's going to be our loom. If you want to, you can go ahead and start with this as your loom, or you can color it all white first and then turn it into a landscape. Now I'm going to draw a horizon line. That is where the sky and the land comes together. I've turned my board side to side to color my sky and make it a little bit easier. Once your sky is complete, then you can color your ground. I'm using oil pastels, but crayons would work great too. When you're finished coloring your cardboard, we're going to turn it into a loom for weaving. Take your template with the 12 notches, not nachos, on it and place it at the top. Take a pencil, put it in between the notches, and draw a line up. Slide the template straight down and then repeat the process at the bottom. Remember, you should have 12 little lines. Count those 12 lines before you cut. When you cut, it's tricky because the cardboard is thick. The easiest thing to do is choke the scissors. That means slide the cardboard all the way to the back of the scissors so you have better leverage and more strength to cut each one of those 12 at the top and 12 at the bottom notches. Now we're going to warp our loom. To warp your loom, you're going to begin by taking the end of your yarn, putting it in any of the corner notches, and then tape the yarn down. That's the tail. Make sure the tail is short. Flip your loom over, and you're going to slide the yarn from the top down to the bottom. The line of yarn should be perfectly vertical. Then you're going to go to the next notch, the one right beside it. You might have to wiggle the cardboard kind of like a loose tooth to get the yarn to fit inside. Once it's in that notch, you're going to bring it straight up. Another vertical line going inside the notch that is next to the very first one you used. We are going to continue to repeat this process until our loom is warped. Wiggle the tooth, slide the yarn in, bring it down like a vertical, perfectly straight line. Wiggle the tooth and slide it in. Go to the next notch right there. Wiggle the tooth, slide the yarn in, and go straight up. You'll want to make sure you don't skip any notches. You'll want to make sure you don't wrap the yarn around the back of the loom. These vertical lines of yarn should only be on the front, not on the back. On the back, you should just see dashed lines of yarn. All right, here I go. I'm going to put it in to the next notch once I figure out this tangled mess. Notice how I slowly untangled my yarn. If you have a knot, it's always good to do it slowly to help unravel your yarn. Now I'm going to bring it straight up. If it's too tight of a squeeze, you could always get your scissors to cut that little bit of cardboard some more, or just wiggle the tooth before you bring it in. And we are going to continue this until we get all the way over to the other side of the loom. As you're warping your loom, if you can, you might want to make sure that your yarn stays attached to the skein or bundle of yarn. The reason is if you cut the yarn, you might not cut enough, and then halfway across warping your loom, you might run out. When you're finished, go ahead, flip your board over. It should look just like that. Cut the yarn and tape it to the back. Now that our loom is warped, we are ready to begin weaving. Let's begin by taking a length of yarn and putting it inside a folded piece of paper. This is how we will thread our needle. Put it inside and then bring the yarn back so there's no yarn sticking out of what I call the little paper hot dog bun. Slide that little paper hot dog bun into the eye or the opening of the needle. Slide it all the way through, and look at that. Your needle is now threaded. So that the yarn doesn't slide out of the needle, let's go ahead and tie a knot. Make the letter U, then make an O. Take the tail that's going around the top. Take the tail, put it in the hole, and pull. Now let's begin weaving. The key to weaving is to go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. You are going under and over the warp threads, and what you're weaving with is called weft. Continue to pull the yarn until you have a little tail of yarn that's as long as your finger. And then double check. Make sure that you have an A, B, or over, under pattern. Then go ahead and pack the yarn down. Now we're going to go back the other way, but this is important. You want to do the opposite. If you do the same thing like I'm doing, meaning I'm following the same pattern of under, over, check out what happens. If you weave the same thing, your weaving will come out. Because I don't want my weaving to come out, I will not be weaving in the same pattern as I go back and forth. Instead, I will be weaving in the opposite. Let me put the yarn in again and then look carefully at where I ended weaving. If you look carefully, you'll notice that my purple yarn went over the white string, and so I will go under the white string. I'm weaving the opposite of the last piece of yarn that I did. And that way, when I pull it through, it does not come out. Sometimes as you pull it through, the yarn needs a little bit of help. It's a little long. You might have to be patient with it as you slowly pull and untangle it. Okay, and when you pull it through, pull it down so it curves like a rainbow. And then look how that yarn bends a little bit. That's called draw in. We don't want that to happen. So gently pull it back if you see it, and then scrunch the yarn down. Okay, I ended with going over. So now I am starting by going under. And notice that I'm weaving back and forth from the right side to the left side, making sure to do the opposite pattern of the last string. Okay, now I'm going to pull it gently through, making sure to pull with that rainbow curve so that that warp string stays nice and tall before scrunching it down with my fingers. All right, let's look closely again. It looks like I just finished by going over, so I'll do the opposite, which is under. Remember to always look at how you finished the row and do the opposite before you start weaving. It's a little tricky. You can do it. It'll be tough at first, but I know pretty soon you'll have the hang of it and you'll really enjoy weaving. I'm going to continue doing the opposite of what the last string did. When I pull the yarn across, remember to pull an arch like a rainbow. That way your string on the end, your warp string, that white string, does not get drawn in. I'm going to continue back and forth until I'm ready for more yarn. When you're ready for more yarn, all you have to do is untie or cut the yarn off of the needle. It should be about as long as your finger, and we're just going to let it hang out of the loom. Then I have to re-thread my needle using my hot dog bun, sliding it inside and tying my knot. And now I'm going to pick up weaving where I left off. So where that tail was sticking out, that's where I will begin. The tail was over, so I will go under. Now I'm going to pull my new yarn again, so there's another tail as long as my finger sitting right next to my first one. And then I'm just right back to weaving. You could tie the two strings together, but I don't really like doing that because it creates a bit of a knot as you are trying to weave. And that little knot can sometimes get hung up on the warp strings. Once you've got the hang of it, you won't weave this fast, but pretty fast, and you're going to weave about halfway up the loom before we start on the roof. Tie a brand new color of yarn to your needle and continue to weave as we have been doing the opposite of what the last string did. You'll notice I have a tail sticking out, so I'm going to pull this until I also have another tail sticking out. And I'm going to continue weaving just like I have been doing, back and forth 3 or 4 times. So again, I'm doing the opposite of the last string, just going back and forth 3 or 4 times. Weaving a triangle. This is the base of the triangle, and now we're going to make the triangle start to get more narrow. So instead of weaving all the way to the end, this is now the new string that I stop at. So I just went under that string. Now I'm going to reverse and go over. I'll stop right here at this one, ignoring that very last warp thread. Crunch it down with your fingers. I just went under, so I am going over. I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times. Basically, I'm subtracting or ignoring those last warp or vertical line strings. Now I'm going to do the same thing one more time, pulling it through, and notice how it catches that one vertical warp line. Now I'm going to get even more narrow, and I'm going to subtract one string as I pull it through. As it goes through, notice that it stops one more string or warp thread inward. Now that's my new stopping place. So when I'm at this end, notice that I'm looking to see, did I just go over? So I will go under, and I'll go back and forth a couple of times. The reason I'm subtracting or only going to a certain point is because I'm trying to create a triangle shape. And I've been doing this or going back and forth at that certain stopping point 3 times before taking it inward one more time. It's a little tricky, so just keep your eyes on the warp string, do the opposite, and think about how the angle of the sides of the lines would look for the roof of your house. I'm just packing it down with my fingertips. Looks like I just went under, so now I will go over. And I'm going to continue with this until I have a triangle and I've reached the top of my loom. Looks like I'm out of yarn, so time to get more yarn. The same way we have been doing it, make sure there's a tail sticking out, match up the 2 tails, and then just continue going back and forth, subtracting one of those warp strings to make sure that you have a triangle for the top of your house. Don't worry about all those little tails sticking out. I'm going to show you how we're going to take care of that. Don't cut them though. Make sure you leave them sticking out. If you cut them, they will unweave themselves and you will be so sad because you'll have to do more weaving. So just leave them hanging out for now. Hey, look at that. I'm almost to the very top of my loom, and now I have a triangle for the roof of my house. Next up, let's talk about getting rid of all those pieces of yarn sticking out. Easy. All you have to do is tuck it under your house. Might make your house look a little bit fluffy, but that's okay. It'll have a little bit more dimension. What do you say we try weaving a chimney? If you're going to weave a chimney, you're only weaving back and forth on 3 strands of warp string. Let's get a little closer. I'm just going over and under 3 strands of yarn. Under, over, under, pull. And notice how I have to press it down so it kind of meets the side of the triangle. It looks like I just went under. So I'll go over and under. There we go. And I'm just going back and forth between 3 strands of yarn. The reason I'm only doing 3 warp strands is because I want this to come up like a tall vertical or a chimney. So it's going to have a rectangular shape. So it looks like I just went under. So I'll go over, under, over, back and forth until I get to the top of the piece of cardboard. That's pretty easy. Now that you're a weaving pro, you've woven a square for a house, you've woven a triangle for the roof, you can certainly weave a teeny tiny chimney for your house. Now that I'm all finished, I'm going to try to use my fingers to do that last little bit because it's tough when you're weaving very close to the top. Now we can talk about decorating our house. Weaving is complete. It's time to decorate your house. You could use felt sheets or foam sheets to cut. I'm using foam. It's really easy to cut. Lay everything out in place before you start to glue down. You could use punches, hole punches for different kinds of shapes. I like to use a little bit of a glue brush to glue small little bits and pieces. When you're all finished gluing everything down, why not use some puffy paint to add some more decoration? Most of all, have fun. Weaving is super awesome to learn how to do. It can be a little tricky when you first start, but I know I have confidence that you will have no problem once you get rolling. Most of all, enjoy the process, and I cannot wait to see how your weavings turn out.